When you first start fly fishing, chances are pretty good that you're going to come home with a 9-foot fly rod with a weight forward floating line and a 9-foot leader to 2 or 3x. The other reality is that you're going to come home with a box of flies that are very common and very appropriate for all sorts of different applications. The number one fly for that is the woolly bugger. Now, woolly buggers can represent so many different things in fly fishing. They can represent bait fish, minnows, leeches, stonefly nymphs, crayfish, dragonfly nymphs, a lot of different things that are found in different aquatic environments. So let's take those woolly buggers and apply them on a larger river like this and break down 5 or 6 common locations where you can successfully fly fish with woolly buggers. One of the best things about fly fishing is that you end up with a lot of habits. I've been fly fishing 42 years, and as you see in this box, there's essentially 3 colors of woolly bugger and a couple of patterns on the other side of the box that are just modifications of a woolly bugger. So even after all these years of fly fishing, guess what? Still a whole box full of woolly buggers. So what we want to do is simply tie a barrel swivel at the very end of your 9-foot leader with a clinch knot. On the bottom side of the barrel swivel, tie on 24 inches of 3x tippet and leave 6 inches out off the tag end of your clinch knot. The swivel's there to add weight, as is the tungsten bead on my woolly bugger. And you come in off the top side to the swivel from your leader. Your tag end now has your first woolly bugger, and the other 18-20 inches of tippet come down, and that's where your second woolly bugger is going to go. And the idea is you've got a tungsten bead and a swivel, and that allows you to cut through the water and into depth. And this setup here quite easily will get you down into 3-4 feet of water fairly quickly and be able to fish that effectively. So in a run like this one, you could literally spend almost your entire day fly fishing. It's counterintuitive to think about fly fishing 200 meters or 200 yards of water all day, but if things are on, there's plenty of fish in a run like this. So when we start at the bottom of the run and work our way upstream, we have all sorts of different options as to how we can fish the woolly buggers. The first option is to cast upstream at a slight angle, let it sink for 2 seconds, maybe 3 seconds, and strip really fast back towards you. And that'll pick up the aggressive fish that are in a little bit shallow. The other option then is to cast a little bit further across and let it sink, and as it drifts downstream past you, then you can pulse your rod tip or maybe strip as everything swings down and straightens out. Okay, so as the line swings downstream past you, you can either twitch your rod or just strip slowly like this. If the fish are active, you could strip faster. If things are slow in colder water or a low front, that kind of thing has happened, you can strip a little slower. From there, remember, you can just roll. You can allow that to water load, come back, allow that to water load. Be a little bit more deliberate and slower with your casts, because remember, you've got 2 beadhead woolly buggers as well as a weighted swivel, and now you can get that out there, swing and strip, or pause, strip, pause, or even bring your rod tip back upstream on a pulse. Any of those things are just there to elicit a strike, and again, if it's colder water, the fish are going to be a little bit more sluggish. You might find the odd really aggressive one that'll swing at a fast strip. Vary it up to find out what's gonna work on a flat like this. And what you're doing is covering fish on the flats that might be holding on rocks that you can't see, little ridges of gravel and deflections that you can't see on the bottom. So when you work from downstream to upstream and you take a few casts and you step up and repeat that, it's actually quite difficult because you're casting across your body. The classic is actually to start on the top end of the run and cast across and let things swing and pulse and twitch and strip. And that's actually the classic, and it's a lot easier because all you have to do is come up, pause, and place it on the water. Maybe do an upstream mend, get that in line, and you can pulse with your rod tip and let that swing all the way around until your fly line is straight up and down in the current. You can do that, or you can strip, you can vary your retrieve, you can pause, you can do all sorts of things, because your fly is either going to rip and pause and twitch, or it can float and flutter and pulse. There's all sorts of things that you can do. The key is to try a retrieve, vary it up, but the one thing you don't want to do is just do what a lot of beginners do, and they think that this is action. This isn't action. This is a really slow retrieve. You want to try fast, pause, and away you go. Get it up, going. If you want to do a slow retrieve, fine, do a slow retrieve, but still give it some life every once in a while. A lot of people, again, will just do these little 5-inch strips. No, pop it, pause. Pop with your rod tip. Bring your rod tip back over here. Pop. Pause it. Try all sorts of different things, even faster than that or slower than that, but use that swing and drift to your advantage in a flat like this. So the next thing that we're going to have a look at is simply nymphing with the same setup. You leave your swivel and your two woolly buggers, and we're going to go about 2 feet above the swivel. I'm going to take the strike indicator tool, and we're just going to hook in and make a little loop like that. Pull down the little plastic sleeve, and you're left with a loop, and we're just going to take some wool and we're going to put it inside there, and we're just going to pull that tight. And that is how easy it is to attach that indicator, and you can just as easily remove it. We've got a gravel trough along shore, and this is a perfect place to focus with the nymphs. And we're going to focus right along the seam line, which is about a rod length out, and that tapers in towards shore. And as that tapers in, it goes from about 5 or 6 feet deep down to up to about 3 feet depth. We have a gravel trough with a really nice bit of choppy surface, and that indicates a depth change in the river, as well as a likely subsurface gravel ledge, or maybe some broken rock on the bottom. And those are places that trout absolutely love to hold. The great current break, as well as a good influx of current and food. So we're going to focus on that, and I'm going to bring my indicator up my leader so I can fish a deeper depth. So when I added the indicator to my leader, I only started about 2 feet above the swivel. Obviously this is about a 5-6 foot trough of water in this trough. So what I'm going to do, and it's this simple, is just pull my indicator up my leader until I'm about 4 or 5 feet above the swivel. And now I'm simply going to cast upstream and let that drift naturally dead drift back towards me. Maybe let it swing out on the bottom end of things, and give it a couple twitches, some life as the nymphs raise up out of the depths. Okay, so the simplest thing to do when nymphing is just make sure that you just cast upstream, get your indicator and flies right into that seam, and just let it drop. Now, as it comes downstream, because I'm on the inside of this seam, I have to do a little bit of a mend and just keep that indicator in the seam line.
Right on.
So the real important thing is to pay attention to which fly the fish eats. It gives you an idea of how deep you have to be and which color that they're targeting. So one of the beauties of this situation is this is a trout magnet, a trout factory. And I'm targeting kind of at that angle into shore, pretty much the first 3 rod lengths out from shore and in. And I can work back and forth in a couple 2-4 foot increments, going right to left, left to right, and come back. And this 80 yards of shoreline here could, if the fish are on, legitimately take me an hour, 2-3 hours, depending on how much action I have and how deep and all the things I have to adjust. If the fish are on, you're gonna get a lot of fish here. If they're not on, this is a prime spot. Why would you want to go anywhere else in the river? It's kind of a U-shaped trough right along the shore with dancing water, current breaks, overhead cover, It is a brilliant spot and the fish are definitely here. All right, so I've worked my way up about 30 yards from the bottom where it was really deep at the back end. As I come forward, the water speed is picking up, the surface is a bit more dancey, and through my polarized sunglasses, I can see that the color change has gone from a deep green back here. Now there's some tea color, that light brown color is starting to appear. That tells me I'm in shallower water. I'm probably between about 18 inches and 3 feet deep from out on the main seam right into this heart here. So all I'm gonna do is again, take my indicator and drop it back down my leader to maybe 3 feet to the bottom fly.
Right on, hey?
Yeah.
Right in that zone you're talking about.
Yeah, a little shallower, right? So the really neat thing is, again, that if you pay attention, that fish also was caught on that lower fly. That's a nice little rainbow.
Absolutely.
Just gonna let that go. Wicked. Okay, so I think the point there, we've established that the dead drift nymphing works. This fly up here, is it because of the swivels, scaring the fish away? No, all it is a depth thing. Those fish are right on the bottom in cold water. We're in it's 5 degrees Celsius, which is what, about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And those fish are just sluggish on the bottom, and that's why they're taking the bottom fly. And again, that came as a result. I knew that I was coming up the shelf in the trough into shallower water. I simply changed the depth of this indicator. Again, deeper water, shallower water, and I can adjust, make sure that hangs those woolly buggers at the right depth and just dead drift back downstream. So now that we've nymphed our way all the way to the top of the run, well, it's not over. All we have to do is take that indicator off by reversing, take that wool out, take the little plastic sleeve off, and guess what? Now we're right back to our streamer setup. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cast across and let it swing down through, pulse, jig, and that'll cover a different retrieve than the dead nymph back towards you. Now we're gonna cast across, pop, 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 jig, and see if we can get a bit more of a faster action response from the fish. And we're just gonna walk our way down. Okay, so what we have right in front of us, we have about 2 rod lengths from shore to fish in another gravel trough. And we have a steep angle of gravel that comes into the river, which indicates you have a steep drop off, which means about 18-24 inches offshore you have a depth change. And those fish are going to be nosed into that depth change. So we're going to, once again, nymph our woolly buggers right along that edge, and maybe another rod length out, which will put us between about 3 feet depth and 5 feet depth of indicator nymph fishing with our woolly buggers. And this again is a prime spot because it's all broken water. There's a drop off going that way, and as the water comes in this way, there's also broken waves and drops and depressions in the gravel and hidden rocks that we don't see, causing all that dancing water. That's prime habitat. And from here up to the point, that's about 80 yards again. And I bet you this is just chock-a with fish all the way up. Another opportunity to fish your double woolly bugger setup is a nice natural seam and a bit of a shelf at the head, and just a nice perfect seam between fast water, the main current, and water coming out of this backwater. It's a perfect little V. It's about 3.5, maybe 4 feet at tops in depth, and we're gonna stick with the same setup. Okay, you got your woolly bugger, you got your swivel, you get your second woolly bugger, and now we're going to just have your indicator total of about 3.5 feet from the bottom fly. This is a perfect opportunity to tight line nymph these 2 woolly buggers together. And if you're not familiar with tight line nymphing, it's essentially just cast. You don't want to overextend your rod, you just want to allow everything to get onto the water layout, keep your rod up, and you're going to keep this indicator, you're going to use that as a sighter. If you look at the tight line nymphing setups, this is not exactly what the purists would want you to use. There's all sorts of wonderful information and gear and tactical gear specific to tight line nymphing. But we're going to use that simple indicator tool as our sighter, and we're going to keep our rod high so this sighter is about 6 or 8 inches off of the water, and the idea is we're going to feel the weight of the woolly bugger as it drifts through the water. At the same time, we can also see this sighter, if it goes down, we can see the take, or we can feel the take of the woolly buggers as it drifts through the seam. Now with this, I'm going to just take my fingers and pull out the fibers, quite a few of the fibers of the woolly buggers, to make them more slender. Because what happens is, with those big hackle and the marabou tail, those parachute and inhibit those woolly buggers from dropping quickly. We're just going to do short lines, maybe again, we still have that 9-foot leader, so it's not too technical. And I'm just going to get out, I'm going to work my way kind of in a 6-foot wide berth of water, just to the left, through the heart, and just outside of that seam. And I'm just going to work my way upstream with short casts, feel, roll, short cast, feel, roll. And we're just going to work our way slowly up this seam, and hopefully we can catch something on this setup. There.
Bugger, eh?
Yeah. All right, so now we finished nymphing this backwater with fingers. All I'm going to do is, again, take off that quick plastic plug on the strike indicator tool, put that away real quick, and now I am just going to, just like we started, cast up and fast strip and retrieve, vary my depth by letting it sinking longer, trying different pulses and different retrieves, and just see if I can elicit a strike. There's all sorts of holding water for fish. Every single one of these seams and fingers of water comes in across that gravel bar and drops off, and there's a perfect little seam. Fish could be sitting on either side or nosed in or downstream of it. All sorts of potential for fish. Off the main flow of the main river, quite often you'll have backwaters that are connected by little fingers of current across a gravel shelf and into the trough. You'll want to fish this with a straight streamer setup with your 2 woolly buggers, and just take 3, 4, maybe 5 casts at each finger, casting across or into the heart of the finger current seam, letting it sink 2, 3, 4 seconds depending on which part. If you're into the deeper water, the slower water, let it sink a little bit longer. Vary your retrieve. All you're trying to do is elicit a response from the fish and prospect the water before moving on to the next most likely spot. So big, deep, slow bits of river are hard to fish. The best you can do is ditch the indicator and just fish along the drop-off along the shoreline without an indicator and just have it go deeper. You may need to add a split shot to get deeper, but that's just the reality of these big pieces of water. The great news is at the top end of almost every deep, slow piece of water is an inflow of riffled water with drop-offs and troughs, gravel bars and broken rock. And as you see, there's all sorts of birds up there, which means there's likely lots of insects, and those fish are just nosed in. And you can use your streamer setup to get a quick strike, or you can dead drift your woolly buggers and just work the edges and the troughs, and chances are pretty good you're going to pick up a trout or two. One final common water type is found in a shelving riffle. The lower main run can easily be fished streamer style or nymphed upstream. As you come to the color change from green or blue to brown and the associated depth change, you can try nymphing under an indicator or tight line, then streamer fish your way back downstream through the run with your woolly buggers. There are a lot of different locations in a river that you can work woolly buggers effectively and move trout even on the slowest of days. Vary your presentation and style based on breaking a river down as we've shared here. And please only look at this video as a starting point to what you can do. Add split shot, be more or less aggressive, mix a woolly bugger with a San Juan worm or other common nymphs and just see what happens. Pay attention to the conditions you're fishing for future reference.